Welcome to Ember Tales. Before we begin, if you're the kind of person who loves stories that make you think, stories that feel stranger than fiction, stories that you'll find yourself telling someone else the next morning, then this channel was made for you. Hit subscribe. A brand new story arrives every single week, and it's always free. Now, find a comfortable position, turn off the lights if you can, and let's begin. Imagine waking up one ordinary morning and making a decision that most people only dream about in their darkest moments. You decide to disappear. No goodbye, no note, no explanation, no trace. You simply cease to exist. Your name, your face, your debts, your failures, your entire life. Gone. Most people think about it. Most people never act on it. John Darwin acted on it. And for 5 extraordinary years, he got away with it completely. This is his story, and it is one of the strangest true stories of the 21st century. It was March 21st, 2002, a cold Thursday morning on the northeast coast of England in a quiet seaside town called Hartlepool. The kind of town where nothing much happens, where neighbors know each other's cars, where a missing person doesn't go unnoticed for long. John Darwin was 51 years old, a prison officer by profession, a husband, a father of 2 grown sons, Mark and Anthony. On the surface, a perfectly ordinary man living a perfectly ordinary life. But beneath the surface, John Darwin was drowning. He and his wife Anne had accumulated serious debt, property investments gone wrong, loans stacking up, a financial situation that felt increasingly impossible to escape. The pressure had been building for years, quiet and suffocating, like water rising slowly in a sealed room. That morning, John kissed his wife Anne goodbye. He walked out of their home on the cliff, a row of houses overlooking the grey North Sea. He carried his red canoe down to the water's edge, and he paddled out. He never came back. Within hours, the coastguard launched a search. Police were notified. The local community held its breath. Days passed, then a week, then 2. His canoe was eventually found, damaged, drifting, empty, near the shore. The conclusion was unavoidable. John Darwin had gone out too far, capsized, and drowned in the cold waters of the North Sea. His body was never recovered, but that, authorities explained, was not unusual. The sea keeps many of its secrets. Anne Darwin identified his belongings. She wept at his memorial service. His 2 sons, Mark and Anthony, stood beside her, devastated, trying to understand how their father had been taken from them so suddenly, so senselessly. The world offered its condolences, filed its paperwork, and moved on. John Darwin was dead, except he wasn't. He was living next door. Not metaphorically, not in another city, under another name, literally next door, in the adjoining bedsit of the very same building where his family had lived, connected through a carefully concealed door hidden in the shared wall between the 2 properties. For the first weeks after his supposed death, John Darwin stayed out of sight. He let the investigation run its course. He let the memorial happen. He let his sons grieve. Then, quietly, he began to resurface, but only behind closed doors. Every day, he passed through that hidden door and spent time with Anne. They had dinner together. They watched television. They planned their next move. Because Anne Darwin knew everything. She had known from the very beginning. The plan had been theirs together. A desperate, calculated gamble born out of financial desperation. If John was legally declared dead, his life insurance policies would pay out. 2 policies, together worth almost £250,000. It was enough to clear their debts, enough to start again somewhere new, and it worked. Anne collected the insurance money. She paid off the debts. She sold properties. She maintained the image of a grieving widow, attending community events, speaking to the press, receiving sympathy from friends and neighbors who had no idea that her husband was eating breakfast on the other side of the wall. Meanwhile, John began carefully constructing a new identity. He obtained a passport in a false name. He started moving more freely, taking cautious trips, keeping a low profile, but no longer completely confined. He even, at one point, applied to volunteer with a local organization under his false identity. He was hiding in plain sight, and the plan impossibly kept working. Months became years. 5 years passed. Then they made a mistake. By 2007, Anne and John had grown bold. Their sights were set on Panama, a tropical country with low taxes, cheap land, and most importantly, no one who knew their faces. They had begun making trips there, scouting locations, imagining their new life under the Central American sun. On one of these visits, a local real estate agent took a routine photograph. The kind of photograph taken thousands of times a day all over the world. Potential buyers standing outside a property, smiling for the camera. The agent uploaded the photo to the company's website. Standard practice, nothing unusual, except that one of the men in the photograph was supposed to be dead. Back in England, John and Anne's son, sitting at his computer one evening, perhaps searching for information about Panama out of curiosity, found the image. There was his father, standing in the sunshine, very much alive, arm around his mother. The world collapsed. The sons contacted authorities. An investigation was launched immediately. British police coordinated with international agencies. And then John Darwin did something extraordinary. In December 2007, 5 years after vanishing into the North Sea, he walked calmly into a London police station. He told them he had no memory of the past 5 years. He claimed amnesia, that he had been wandering, confused, lost, unaware of who he was or where he belonged. It was, by any measure, the least convincing story ever told to a British police officer. No one believed a word of it. The investigation that followed was thorough and devastating. Text messages, bank records, passport applications, witness testimonies, travel records from Panama, the hidden door between the two properties, the insurance claims, the sold properties, everything pointed in one direction. In July 2008, John Darwin was found guilty of fraud and deception. He was sentenced to 6 years and 3 months in prison. Anne Darwin, who had maintained her innocence until the evidence became impossible to deny, was found guilty of the same charges. The judge noted that she had been, in many ways, the more calculated of the two, the one who had collected the money, managed the finances, and kept up the performance of grief for 5 long years, while her son suffered. She received 6.5 years. But the legal punishment, as harsh as it was perhaps not the most devastating consequence of what the Darwins had done. That fell on their sons. Mark and Anthony had spent 5 years grieving a father who was alive. They had mourned him. They had adjusted to a world without him. They had rebuilt their lives around his absence. And then they discovered not only that he was alive, but that their mother had known all along. In the years that followed, both sons gave interviews describing the moment they found out as the single most painful experience of their lives. More painful, they said, than the original disappearance. Because grief, however terrible, is something the human heart is built to survive. It has a shape, a beginning and eventually an end. But betrayal, deliberate, sustained, intimate betrayal, has no clean shape. It rewrites everything that came before it. Every memory, every phone call, every moment of sympathy offered and received. Anthony Darwin said he felt as though his entire childhood had been called into question, as though he no longer knew which parts of his family's story were real. John Darwin was released from prison after serving half his sentence. He has since spoken publicly about his experience, given interviews, and written about the events that led him to that canoe on that cold March morning in 2002. Whether he fully understands what he took from his sons, not just years, but trust, and the simple comfort of believing that a parent's love is unconditional, is a question only he can answer. Anne Darwin was also released. The marriage, unsurprisingly, did not survive. The sons have maintained a complicated, painful relationship with both parents, trying, as adult children of broken families often must, to find some version of peace with the past that will never fully make sense. And somewhere, in all of this, there is a lesson that is almost too simple to say out loud. You cannot outrun what you owe, not to the bank, and not to the people who love you. John Darwin paddled out to sea to escape his debts. He came back, eventually, to face something far harder. This has been Ember Tales. If this story stayed with you, if it made you think, or kept you awake just a little longer than you planned, share it with someone. That's how this channel grows, and it means more than you know. Subscribe for a brand new story every single week. And until next time, sleep well.